Good evening at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 24th of February 2021. My name is Toby Lepati Mesme, and this is indeed MesmePolitics. Between now and 7:30, we have got a show for you on the way. Labour are now definitively pitching themselves to the right of the Conservative government. Also, Joe Biden and Liberal hypocrisy over kids in cages as a quote-unquote migrant overflow facility opens. Got it in the end. But first, why isn't Gavin Williamson gone? Why is the man who presided over such catastrophic failings still the Education Secretary? This is all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective for the next half hour. I'm Toby Lepati Mesme. You can get in touch at any point in the chat. Come say hi. So secondary schools in England are to be funded to run summer schools for pupils worst affected by the pandemic, the government has announced, as part of its latest education recovery plans to help children catch up on lost learning. The new measures include £200 million British pounds to expand the government's national tutoring programme, plus an additional £300 million recovery premium, which will go direct to schools to support the most disadvantaged children. There was, however, no mention of more radical measures, which have been mooted in recent weeks, including extending the school day or shortening the holidays to give pupils time to catch up. Critics warned the government's latest package was nowhere near enough to address the yawning educational divide that has opened up between poor children and their more advanced peers during the pandemic, and called for a more ambitious recovery plan. Natalie Pereira, Chief Executive of the Education Policy Institute, says while any additional support for schools is welcome, the government's package announced today is not enough to support pupils to catch up on their learning and to provide wellbeing activities for pupils of all ages. The new recovery premium will provide an extra £6,000 for the average primary school and £22,000 for each secondary, much too modest to make a serious difference. General Secretary of the Schools Leaders Union, Paul Whitman, says summer schools will be of value for some pupils, but it will be important not to overwhelm students. Recovery cannot happen in a single summer. The government presented its plans as a new £700 million recovery package. The total of new money for schools during the pandemic is £1.7 billion. The National Education Union says some of this is recycled from previous commitments, and much more will need to be needed to address the scale of the problem of the education divide between poor children and their more advanced peers. So, this government, through the ages, has shafted schools. It's shafted school staff. Now, in the middle of a pandemic, it's shafted school staff and teachers' unions by putting everyone in schools at risk by doing a reopening so recklessly. And their policy for 10 years has done nothing but basically stick it to teachers, stick it to children, overwhelm them with excessive examination and massive sort of standardisation of education that's done no one any good. The lofty ideas of Michael Gove don't translate very well when they hit the cold, brutal face of reality. There is no commitment on the part of this government to the genuine well-being of children. However, there are welcome measures in here. There are welcome measures that have been announced. The money has to go in, massive scale investment to help children catch up. Obviously, they've not gone far enough, but it's always good to see more money put in there. There's no framework for it, though. They have no overarching strategy, and the education department is still asleep at the wheel. Kids are very much under too much pressure here. That pressure needs to be dialed back on, because right now the government is piling more and more on. We don't want to extend the school day. In my view, I think that would be damaging for kids' mental health. We don't want to stick loads of people in summer school if we can avoid it. We need to prioritise people's mental health and socialising. Obviously, people need to be back. We need to prioritise those things over hard academic, stressful catch-up, because we already see the effect that forcing people to cram for exams has on their mental health. Let's not dial up the pressure. Let's ease people in. Let's do this holistically. Let's not hammer academic targets over these poor kids' heads, lord them over their heads for years to come. Gavin Williamson headed the Downing Street press conference today, talking about the measures.
Today we're announcing the introduction of a new one-off £302 million recovery premium for state primary and secondary schools, building on the pupil premium to further support pupils who need it most. We're expanding our successful tutoring programmes. £200 million will fund an extended national tutoring programme for primary and secondary schools, an extension to the 16 to 19 tuition fund to support more students in English, maths and other vocational and academic subjects, and funding to support language development in early years children. Finally, £200 million will be available for secondary schools to deliver face-to-face summer schools. Schools will be able to target individual pupils' needs. This means that if your child needs extra help, then they will be able to get it. For example, a block of tutoring can help a child gain 3 to 5 months of catch-up in learning. We know our teachers are best placed to understand what your children will need, so they'll have the tools to deliver that extra boost and make a real difference as we recover from this pandemic. The package announced today will build on the £1 billion catch-up package we announced last June.
So numbers aside, and government actions aside, why hasn't he gone? Okay? He has presided over the most disastrous handling of a department during the pandemic, and that says a lot considering the blatant corruption, and we'll call it that. We call it that in the third world. We'll call it that here of the health department, and the incompetence of the cabinet office, and the sort of skewed priorities of the Home Office, and the bizarre interventions from the Foreign Office. With really, out of all this, the Education Department has won the most useless, directionless, incompetent part of the government. Why hasn't he gone? Is there any chance of him surviving a reshuffle? Absolutely not, because even this government isn't that brain dead, basically. It's ridiculous that he's still here. Meanwhile, we're talking about secondary school children needing to wear face coverings. Dr. Jenny Harris, England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer, was talking about why this is a sensible move.
It's on the for and that you can't.
So we've always said, Will, all the way through this, is that we'll always follow the best scientific, medical and health advice. And when we have that advice come forward, that's obviously quite rightly the advice that we follow. Jenny, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to say on the wearing of face masks.
I will actually, because I think earlier on in the broadcast when I was talking to Lauren, I was speaking in very general terms, and obviously this is very about face coverings and their use. So I think we need to be very clear about face masks and PPE, which is for clinical use. Obviously, face coverings are there to help others. We're protecting others by wearing them. And there are a number of different conditions at the moment. So, for example, we have a new variant, and while we are understanding that more, then obviously taking additional precautions makes sense. We understand more about the ability for aerosol generation and transmission. So that is also important. So things I think have moved on, and it should be reassuring to know that we look at the evidence and then adjust our advice accordingly. But I think also one of the things here, if testing is coming into place in schools, and we will see, but it's very likely that we will find a few cases, and there will be some children do have to stay at home, unfortunately, for a short period at the start of term. But then over time, what will happen is those school environments should be free, more or less free of infection. And at that point, as the Secretary...
That would be nice, wouldn't it? We'll see what happens. That obviously sounds hopeful. Now, moving over the United States, and, the administration of US President Joe Biden is facing blowback after reports surfaced that facilities for migrant children previously slammed by Democrats are reopening as it is set to begin processing asylum claims at a camp on the Texas-Mexico border. The camp, which is home to hundreds of mostly Central American asylum seekers, has recently been hit hard by extreme weathers in northern Mexico, and according to the US Department of Homeland Security, as President Biden continues to rebuild the nation's border management in a way that reflects America's values, addressing humanitarian needs in Matamoros has become a priority. Some people living in the camp for more than a year under former President Trump were basically there for a year under the Remain in Mexico policy. The White House Press Secretary, Jen Psaki, has denied the Biden administration was putting kids in cages. And the US is reopening a tent facility for unaccompanied migrant teenagers in Texas and a shelter in Miami, Florida, both of which have been closed since 2019 as it deals with a surge of attempted southern border crossings by asylum seekers. This is, the headline from the Washington Post was First Migrant Facility for Children opens under Biden. Dozens of migrant teens arrived Monday at a federal government facility that stayed open for only a month. In 2019, AOC says this is not okay, never has been okay, never will be okay, no matter the administration or party. Our immigration system is built on a carceral framework. It's no accident that challenging how we approach both these issues are considered controversial stances. They require reimagining our relationship to each other and challenging common assumptions about things we take for granted. It's only 2 months into this administration, and our fraught, unjust immigration system has not transformed in that time, will not transform in that time. That's why bold reimagination is so important. DHS shouldn't exist, agencies should be reorganised, ICE gotta go, ban for-profit detention, create climate refugee status, and more. So that's what we're looking at here. This is kids in cages. We can call it migrant overflow facilities. We can see the umming and ahhing, but it is kids in cages. This is what we were all up in arms about Trump doing. It's morally abhorrent, as AOC says, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, no matter who is doing it. It's a moral aberration here. It's a stain on the Biden administration as much as it was a stain on the Trump administration, whether one of them did a little bit harsher than the other. The hypocrisy of liberals and so-called progressives on this is worse than, the Trumpists who were completely transparent about not giving a damn about these kids, whereas liberals pretend to care about these kids. They really don't. They really don't. They just want a Democratic administration making these children suffer and sleep under aluminium blankets as opposed to the Trump administration. I want an admission from anyone who was, vehemently supporting Biden and claiming that would fix this, rather than supporting Biden, acknowledging the reality that he's god-awful. I want you to now admit you didn't care. If you supported Joe Biden in the primary, I want you now to admit, you utter clown, you did not care for a second about these children. Because you didn't. I said Biden should win the election. You supported Biden, saying he's dreadful. During the general election, fine. If you supported Biden in the primary, I want an apology right now. If you ever thought anything would change for the better on such important areas as this, where so many people are suffering. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And this presidency is hostile, right, to the left and the left's priorities. However, it is not, and this is ridiculous that this is the case, it's not as hostile to the left as the current leadership of the Labour Party in Britain. It's not as hostile to its left flank as the current Labour leadership is to its own left flank, which is much stronger. Ludicrous and ridiculous. America is now outflanking us from the left in terms of their centre-left party. Some polling came through, some excellent polling data. Net favourability for various key politicians. Nancy Pelosi, -11. Mitch McConnell, -48. Chuck Schumer, -10. Meanwhile, AOC, +1, Kamala Harris, +5, Joe Biden, +8, and who's the most popular politician in the United States? That's right, it remains Bernie Sanders, more popular than the president, at +10% favourability. Bernie Sanders is still more popular than Joe Biden. It was an absolute myth that his divisiveness, quote-unquote, would bring him down in an election. The parallels with Corbyn, well, right, and they're both wonderful, principled individuals, are wrong in terms of popularity. Towards the end game in 2019, Corbyn's popularity ratings were dire for a number of factors. Bernie Sanders' popularity ratings are still in the positive. It is a politically wrong assertion, and it was a politically wrong assertion, to say what happened to Jeremy Corbyn, where it was Brexit and dire approval ratings, will automatically happen to Bernie Sanders when there's no such thing as Brexit. There was a divisive president, a really divisive president, and positive approval ratings. You know, he's the most popular, most trusted politician in America, and no one reckoned with that. We can have a listen here to Julian Castro in a debate back in September 2019 for the Democratic nomination, actually challenging, I want you to properly listen to this, challenging Joe Biden on his immigration record, because that's when the gloves come off and you really see, this is what they really think. And they all coalesced around this guy.
Controlled the White House and Congress in 2009 and didn't pass immigration reform. And this broke a promise made by President Barack Obama to Latinos. So why should voters trust Democrats now? I mean, now it is even more difficult, as you know, because you need Republican votes in the Senate. So are you willing, for instance, to give up DACA or give up a path to citizenship or even agree to build a wall in order to legalize 10.5 million undocumented immigrants?
Jorge, thank you very much for that question. And look, I agree that Barack Obama was very different from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has a dark heart when it comes to immigrants. He built his whole political career so far on scapegoating and fear-mongering and otherizing migrants, and that's very different for Barack Obama. But my problem with Vice President Biden, and Corey pointed this out last time, is every time something good about Barack Obama comes up, he says, oh, I was there, that's me too. And then every time somebody questions part of the administration that we were both part of, he says, well, that was the president. I mean, he wants to take credit for Obama's work, but not have to answer to any questions. I mean,
Vice President Biden,
I don't get that.
You have 45 seconds.
Let me just say,
That's not what I said.
let me just say that I was the first candidate in early April to put forward an immigration plan. You know why? Because I'm not afraid of Donald Trump on this issue. I'm not going to backpedal. I'm not going to pretend like I don't have my own vision for immigration. So we're not going to give up DACA. We're not going to give up protections for anybody. I believe that on January 20th, 2021, we're going to have a Democratic president. We're going to throw out Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn and have a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. And we're going to pass immigration reform within the first 100 days.
Vice President, 45.
Meanwhile, Jen Psaki is defending this, saying it's not kids in cages.
Why is the Biden administration reopening a temporary facility for migrant children in Texas?
Well, first, the policy of this administration, as you well know, but just for others, is not to expel unaccompanied children who arrive at the border. And the process, how it works, is that Customs and Border Control continue to transfer unaccompanied children to the HHS Office of Refugee Resettlement. That can take a couple of days. I just want to give this context because people need to understand the process. But because of COVID-19 protocols, the social distancing requirements, the capacity of existing Office of Refugee Resettlement shelters has been significantly reduced because, of course, you can't have a child in every bed. There needs to be spacing, and we abide by those spacing to protect the kids who are living in those facilities for a short period of time. And to ensure the health and safety of these kids, HHS took steps to open an emergency facility to add capacity where these children can be provided the care they need before they are safely placed with families and sponsors. So it's a temporary reopening during COVID-19. Our intention is very much to close it, but we want to ensure that we can follow COVID protocols as unaccompanied minors come into the United States.
But it's the same facility that was open for a month in the Trump administration. Summer 2019, that is when Joe Biden said, under Trump, there have been horrifying scenes at the border of kids being kept in cages, and Kamala Harris said, basically, babies in cages is a human rights abuse being committed by the United States government. So how is this any different than that?
We very much feel that way. These are facilities. Let me be clear here. One, there's a pandemic going on. I'm sure you're not suggesting that we have children right next to each other.
Shame on the Biden administration. Shame on Joe Biden. Shame on Kamala Harris. Shame on Jen Psaki. Shame on the Democratic Party. It's a moral stain. They are a disgrace. They are no better than the Trump administration. If you think otherwise, I'm sorry. You've been taken in. You're delusional. Joe Biden doesn't care about you. He only cares about his corporate donors. It's Trumpism, but they're being more civil about it. That's what we're seeing on this particular policy. Other areas, of course, it's better. On this policy, it is, the same. Okay? That's how bad we are. Meanwhile, over in the UK, I know, it's quite ludicrous. So Boris Johnson, this is the headline from The Guardian. Boris Johnson pledges more COVID support than Labour is actually demanding. PM says budget will do far more than the paltry agenda set out by Keir Starmer. That's right. Keir Starmer, did his speech, pitched it all on, they're going to be all about austerity. We're not. Turns out, actually, the Tories were serious about investing, and Labour have, as I worried, made themselves look like clowns because they've said the Tories are the party of austerity. They're clearly not anymore. And Labour has got egg on its face because everything it's demanding and more will be provided in the budget.
Mr. Speaker, if you'll only wait till next week, I think you'll find that we'll do far more than that paltry agenda that he set out. Far more than that. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, it is quite mystifying to see.
Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. This is the era of politics we live in now. Meanwhile, Labour won't back a corporation tax rise or a windfall tax on big firms.
But what we're saying is that this is not the time to consider tax rises.
Right,
we're in the middle of an economic crisis,
so that's
and this
been
is
dropped.
not the time to do it.
So that's been dropped. That is no longer a commitment by the Labour Party or the Labour leader.
What we're saying is this is not the time to do that in the middle of an economic crisis.
So we can be really clear from you then, as Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, that you would not support any tax rises at all as the Labour Party right now.
In the budget next week, we don't want to see tax rises. This is not the time to do that.
OK, well, what happens if, as some speculation suggests, and some sources suggested to me, that the government is intent on raising corporation tax for the biggest businesses, and there's also a suggestion that they might introduce a windfall tax on some of the companies, perhaps supermarkets, who've done very well in some areas during the pandemic because people have been shopping online. Are you suggesting we'll get to a position where actually the Labour Party would vote against the Conservative Party wanting to put taxes up on business or introduce a windfall tax to help pay for the cost of COVID?
Well, let's see what the government put out in the budget next week rather than talking about hypotheticals.
But that's the logical... I mean, you've just said it's not time for tax rises, so the implication of that is that Labour would vote against a Conservative government introducing taxes on business to help pay for all the things that you want, like, extra money for kids to catch up.
As I say, let's see what the government put out in their budget next week. My point is that what the government should be focusing on now is investment in growth and trying to get the economy back on its feet. And if you have a country where businesses are closing, where people don't have money to spend in the economy, and where you haven't got investment going into public services and infrastructure, that is no way to get the economy back on its feet.
This is absolutely bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Labour positioning. I mean, Labour are gonna lose seats. At the next general election. They're going to get trounced in the local elections. They're going to lose seats at the next general election, be it in 2022, be it in 2024. Bizarre. Utter, complete failure by the Labour Party to do anything remotely progressive. This is contemptible. This is deserving of contempt. This is the Labour Party. And this is what we're seeing. Starmer's speech ran flat. It ran flat because it wasn't nearly ambitious enough. They keep suggesting things that they think are ambitious. They're really not. If your standard policy is don't cancel the extension to universal credit, great. Rishi Sunak's going to deliver that. Your main, propose policies they're not going to do because they actually mean something. Propose a Green New Deal, not a paltry, what was it last I heard, 6 billion, 60 billion? It was, I don't even think it was 60 billion. It was something ridiculous. That didn't in any way match up. Was it 30 billion? It didn't match up to anything near a Green New Deal. Why are you not suggesting a Green New Deal? I think I've massively overestimated it with 30 billion. I can't remember what figure it is. That's how forgettable what they suggest is. But they came out with a green plan. It was a lot of things the government would probably do anyway. And it was not a Green New Deal. Where's the People's Green New Deal? Where's taking advantage? The Tories are going to do, but in a cronyist, neoliberal way, in terms of green investment. The state aid rules are gone. We're free of the shackles of the EU state aid rules. Why aren't you going to get big talking about big a big People's Green New Deal, as suggested by Grace Blakely. Why aren't you going to talk about these things? It's absolutely ludicrous. Labour has lost its chance. Had a chance to be heard last year. It's lost its chance to be heard for another generation. Shame on Keir Starmer. Shame on his team. They are utterly, utterly useless. And any of the excesses or the failures of the Corbyn era pale in comparison. Do you remember all those people saying, Jeremy Corbyn can't hold them to account, it's a shambles? Have you seen this? This is a shambles. I wouldn't vote Labour if you paid me. I wouldn't vote Labour if you paid me. That's where I am with it right now. You know, I'd sooner vote Tory. That's how bad it is. I'll never vote Tory, but I would sooner vote Tory than vote for this shower who are in the leadership of the Labour Party right now. I hope they lose seats. I hope they get absolutely thrashed. And I hope they learn the lessons from that. Meanwhile, a stitch-up is going on. Labour sources have told Squawk Box that the party plans to follow its shameful and widely condemned exclusion of 3 local women, including hugely popular councillor Anna Rothery, from the contest to become its mayoral candidate, with a manoeuvre no less brazen and anti-democratic. The party aims to parachute in former MEP Teresa Griffin and wants to make her the only candidate in the reopened selection, effectively imposing her on Liverpool members. Griffin has previously been backed by Labour to Win, the overtly right-wing umbrella group run by Labour First. Such links would make her an unpalatable choice to many members. The hierarchy's war on the membership and the city continues. People are saying bring back Rebecca Long-Bailey. Yes, I agree. Bring back Rebecca Long-Bailey. Starmer deserves to lose after what he did to the party in 2017. Karma, agree. I mean, the delusion of the people's vote brought down the Corbyn project, and the people who funded it and backed it knew that. They preyed on the sort of the very admirable sort of solidaristic values of a lot of young people. You know, we're European and all that, when actually it was a bankroll project bankrolled by the big banks. It's absolutely ridiculous. And people like Alistair Campbell, you know, war criminals, knew exactly what they were doing. It's a contemptible stitch-up by the Labour Party here. It's a middle finger to socialists, to democracy in the party, which Starmer claimed to be all for. You know, we won't stitch up elections like Corbyn. Corbyn never stitched up an election. This leadership definitely is. It's far more Stalinist than anything the Corbyn leadership ever did. And at the same time, it's a middle finger to black and ethnic minority people in the Labour Party, local people, City of Liverpool. It's just a middle finger to a lot of people that really, if Labour thinks they can win without, they're on one. And I think I want to close on. It's a piece here. You know, Viktor Orban's government is regressive on economic issues as well as everything else. And what it basically tells us is, you know, even when these governments are socially conservative, economically, quote-unquote, progressive, they move to the left economically, actually they will exclude key groups in society from the benefit of that spending. So what the Tories are going to do, it will establish a hegemonic political project. It will reap dividends for them with ex-Labour voters who are to the left economically, but right in the culture wars to the right socially. However, it will exclude deliberately minorities and the most vulnerable in society. So all those people will continue to get shafted. They will continue to get shafted, and but at the meantime, you know, the Tory voters will actually get swashed. That's a new word. Swashed in Keynesian spending glory. Where is the opposition? The next decade we're without one. Thank you for listening. We will be back same time, same place, 7 p.m. tomorrow for another edition of MesmePolitics. Thanks for listening today. That was definitely a passionate one. A lot of emotive issues, you know, right through from kids in cages to Labour stitch-ups. You can tell I really mean it when I'm talking about this sort of stuff. You know, we started off quite dispassionate, nuanced discussion about education and light probe at walking broomstick Gavin Williamson. We ended with screaming at the incompetence of the Labour Party. about education and like